a playlist original.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster. My name is Gaius Bowling, and Owen, we have another packed show tonight, which is great.
I know. Yes, we do. We have a returning guest that we're super excited about to be back. It's really exciting to see you again.
Yeah, our boy
Antonio. You want to
Antonio.
introduce yourself again?
Oh, I thought you were talking about me. Thanks, Owen.
I
I was ready to go.
Yeah, what's up, guys? It's good to be back, especially to talk about what we're talking about today. I couldn't be happier to be on.
Yeah, we are. We have some news and stuff to talk about at the top, and we have to talk about a movie we saw this weekend. But we're also dedicating this episode to the 15th anniversary of Grindhouse that falls this week. So this is very much in like Antonio's wheelhouse. I was very happy that when I put it on Twitter that he messaged me. He was like, "I would love to be on." So more than happy to have you on this one.
No way.
Because it feels like a good one for you to be on, I think. Which is perfect.
I think so too. I mean, it's something I was eventually going to cover on mine, but I didn't know how to do it. So covering it on yours, it'll just get that out of my way, and I can focus on other things and get that nut out.
Yeah.
Because much like
get that nut out of the way.
Yeah, because much like us, you also have a pretty packed schedule, and I just want to also. I know you've been on the show before, but for people that aren't familiar with your stuff, like tell them about what your podcast is all about.
Yeah, so the Cultworthy Podcast is a exposure and review show where I talk about films that were like off the radar from like the 70s, 80s, 90s, give them a chance to develop a cult following they may have never had. And I've started having guests to deep dive on either subjects or topics too. And then the other podcast I have is the Cultworthy Classic, which is a weekly deep dive into cult-worthy films made before 1970.
Yeah, it's such an awesome concept. Yeah, it's such an awesome concept. Like, there's so many things, either from listening to it or when I see you post it, I'm like, I'll be reminded of stuff I haven't seen in forever, or you completely, introduced me to stuff I've never seen at all, which I think is such a cool concept for a show, because there's so many people out there doing all the Main Street stuff, and you're kind of putting, an eye on things that we should all get familiar with that maybe people aren't too familiar with, which is a really cool thing, I think. Awesome.
Yeah, Gaius, and ever since we've had Antonio on, I mean, we've just absolutely loved this podcast. He's always talking about good stuff and even kind of giving us a few ideas sometimes to improve ours. So really happy to have you back, man.
Yeah, I want to say this too before we go on. After we had Antonio on, I don't think I've told Owen this, but after we had him on, and he's just really good at the delivery and all that stuff. In my head, I was like, "Oh, we have to get so much better, guys. we have to get so much better, guys."
Antonio has a phenomenal voice.
Yeah,
already
perfect for this.
Perfect podcasting voice.
I mean, it only took me 40 years to figure that out, but better late than never, right?
Hey, man, you're still young, like Gary Vee says. We're all still young until you hit 80.
There you go. But yeah, so we're happy to have you on, and thank you for actually sitting through all the new stuff. It should still be fun for you, even when we get to Morbius. You can still, I'm sure you have some jokes that you can crack on Jared Leto when we get there. So,
oh yeah, man, my first appearance on this show was 30 minutes of talking shit about Jared Leto. So I mean, it is kind of the perfect opportunity, right?
Yeah. But Jack wasn't there. Jack loves him, so.
We did another episode. Apparently, this is a Dania and Jared Leto hating podcast, but I'm not on either of those teams.
Hey, I do not hate Zendaya. Owen doesn't like Zendaya. I love Zendaya.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, we're okay. We're getting a little list of hit lists here, all right?
Yeah,
I'm keeping this here.
The few. I'm one of the few.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump into some news real quick. We said we had to. We were going to talk about the Will Smith stuff again, if it developed into something else. And it did at the end of the week. Actually, throughout the week, the Academy talked about how they were going to get into some disciplinary action against him. And we didn't know what that action would be. It could have been suspension, expulsion, sanctions, a bunch of other stuff. And then this week, there was all these conflicting stories about the Academy saying during the show after it happened that they asked him to leave and he refused. And then other people were saying no, it wasn't so much that they told him to, is that they suggested that he should go. So then there was this whole kind of back and forth, well, who's telling the truth? And then the producer of the show, Will Packer, said that Chris Rock, because there was LAPD on hand, they were ready to take Will Smith out if that's what they wanted. He said that take him out. That sounds really bad. Not take him out, but like escort him out. Escort him out.
Dart gun.
Escort him out. But they said that Chris Rock didn't want that. And then it came out that Chris Rock's people were like, no, we never said that either. So there's all these like conflicting things going on. But what happened on Friday is that Will Smith actually resigned from the Academy. Maybe because he saw the writing on the wall, or he thinks it looks better to get ahead of it and do it himself. Even though he's doing that, the Academy said that they are still looking into disciplinary action against him, which I guess that would be like sanctions and stuff like that, because there's not much more they can do now that he's out. But yeah, I'll throw it to Antonio first because he's the guest. Like, what do you kind of think of like where this is at now with him resigning, and then also then putting his like kind of future projects on pause right now while this is all going on?
Well, I mean, like, it's funny because that night into the wee hours, you and I got into like a Twitter debate where we were like kind of tag teaming against other people on Twitter. I had to back out. You fought the good fight. I was just like, I can't win any of these. But my opinion still stands on that, man. Like, I mean, we are all kind of like immersed in cinema and this industry. You know, you're a reporter. A lot of us have worked in production. We all have podcasts talking about it. So there is a bit of hypocrisy, us like kind of talking shit about it, because we are dealing with an industry that's really built on ego and narcissism. Oh, yeah. We like to pretend it doesn't exist, but it totally does. And this is the perfect example of what can happen when that gets left unchecked. You know, so right. we are dealing with a guy who really feels invincible. And I've heard different aspects of it, like, oh, well, you know, it was an instantaneous decision, or maybe it was premeditated. They had beef. I've heard conversations where it's like, you have to be of a certain ethnicity to even have an opinion. Forget all about that. It's about ego and narcissism. And I'm going to bring us in the darkness. I'm going to bring us back out to the light. Like, this is a reality check for anyone who would have thought that this was acceptable behavior at an awards ceremony like this. Because Will Smith and Jada, in her own sense too, made this a moment about them that completely robbed any and all attention and appreciation and joy to people who have worked their whole lives to get there. And as soon as that thing happened, everything else took a back seat. It still has a back seat. And I mean, I thought they should have stopped the awards ceremony right then and been like, all right, let's start over. Like, and at the same time, before I go on too long, shame on ABC for not cutting, because they could have easily just cut and then let the rest of the ceremony gone on. We would have not known what would have happened. They had a delay. We would have heard about it the next day, obviously, or even maybe like an hour later from the international markets. But yeah, man, like the decision to not cut, I think, is entirely on ABC. I blame them more than anybody.
But it's good TV.
Yeah, that's phenomenal TV. Yeah, and to respond to you, I always get reminded of this now. It's, you can do 9 things right out of 10. It's that one thing that you do wrong that everyone remembers, and that's exactly what it was. It was the slap heard around the world. Like, everyone like forgot all about the awards and everything. So it's an unfortunate thing. Everyone would have seen it because Japan and Australia had the feeds going, so same shit. We would have seen it eventually, so I still think it would have been a controversial thing. Live did not help it at all. Yeah. But yeah, the optics, the optics of the Oscars producers like walking up to Will Smith and being like, "Hey, man, you gotta leave," would have just been amazing just to see that happen. Like, what are you gonna do? He's literally up for the most important award, and he won. So you guys are like idiots, and he wins because you know the results before it happens. So it's like you had no choice but to keep him there. You can say all you want, and I think that's why we're getting all these conflicting reports, is because the Oscars, like, they weren't going to take him out. They knew he won. You're going to have your top prize be there.
Yep. Well, Case, what I'm going to say is, I mean, kind of commenting on the development of it now, it's I'm really glad that he decided to take further action for himself and kind of admit his mistake and decide to resign from the academy. I mean, the thing is, I think it is somewhat of a publicity stunt because resigning from the academy doesn't really mean anything. It just means he can't really be in that social club of the Hollywood elites now. And I think that really doesn't matter. I mean, he's going to miss a few luncheons, which, boo-hoo him. But he can still get nominated. He can still kind of work on projects. I'm just happy to see that all of the projects that he's kind of been in circulation currently right now have been on hold. So it's really good for me to see that they're kind of taking a step back. Like, he's in the hot seat right now. He's a little bit sort of thing like, we don't really want to touch that. Let's give it some time. I'm just happy that that's happening because – if anything, the best case scenario is that he's not going to work for a while, and I think he deserves that. So that's basically the best thing I think about this development. I think he's trying to get ahead of it so that he doesn't look like he got fired, in quotes, I guess, and because that would have been like, oh my gosh, Will Smith got kicked out, and it's like, no, I decided to leave on my own accord. So I think that's basically what it was, kind of like one of those things, like a CEO saying, hey, listen, it's time for you to leave. You can resign peacefully, but if you don't, we'll fire you. I think that's kind of what the whole situation turned out to be, and happy that his projects are on hold. But you know what? He deserves some punishment.
Yeah, I mean, like you were asking me over the weekend, like what are the perks of being in the academy? And they're like, they get to go to all these like events, they get to go to screenings, they get to vote for their category and Best Picture, which doesn't seem like a lot to most people, but to an actor it would be, right? Those are like a lot of the perks, and someone brought this up to me today. They were like, if he didn't resign and let's just say they expelled him, and he would be on the list with like Harvey Weinstein if he got expelled. Like he would be a part of that little twosome of people that got kicked out of the academy. And I just think maybe his publicist was like, hey, it just looks better if you take this hit and just do it yourself now, and it'll just look better. Now, as far as his projects being on hold, I actually talked to a few people on our website and a few other people that thought it wasn't right for his projects to be put on hold. They thought it was silly that like, okay, now you can still work with the guy. I mean, maybe like give it like a little bit of time, but like they're like, oh, we don't know what we're going to do with these projects now. They're going to just let them go. I guess like Sony had like sent him the first 40 pages for Bad Boys 4. And now they're like, oh, we don't know what to do with that. And then he had like 3 projects with Netflix that they're like, we don't know what they're going to do. The big one is the Apple TV one that's already done. It's already shot, and it's supposed to come out later this year. And it looks like it's prime for like the Oscars. And it's called Emancipation. Apple paid $130 million for it. And I'm sure they're just wondering like, well, how the fuck do we like promote this now? Or are they just hoping that like by the time they start to, like this will be an afterthought and there'll be a new scandal to focus on? And
is the movie going to be released on just Apple Plus or also?
Well, they're going to do what they kind of did with like Coda and stuff. Like it gets like a limited kind of release, so it can qualify for Oscars if they wanted to. And then, and I think they are going. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they won't. He can still get nominated for an Oscar. He can still be in movies. It's not like I think some people thought that he was expelled from like ever being nominated again. That's not true. Chris Rock's brother, though, Tony Rock, said that he feels that they should take his Oscar away. And that he doesn't accept his apology. It feels like he's like speaking for his brother because his brother is not saying anything. And Tony Rock's been on like the comedy circuit too, and just been going off on the whole thing.
Sorry, who?
Tony Rock is Chris Rock's brother. Oh, hey, we all know. But Chris. But I will say, like through this whole thing, like Chris Rock's been like a gentleman through this whole thing because he could be like a lot worse right now. He's doing his own stand-up tour. He could be going off about this. I mean, he might be waiting for the moment. But I think from the moment this happened, he's handled this as well as he could have, given the situation, I think.
Yeah, he's got
I saw some comments that I thought were funny.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I saw some comments that were funny about when his ticket sales skyrocketed after the whole event and like the best way for him to do an opening act. And one of my favorites was he just comes out with like a giant neck brace on. Or something just to start a show.
There you go.
Yeah, I was going to say that Chris Rock also has like nearly the entire entertainment industry behind him. Like every stand-up comedian, every talk show host, like there's very few people that aren't going to take his side. And with Will's thing, I mean, I think this is a big lesson for Will because I think this is teaching him that he is a product You know, like if a car goes faulty, they're going to recall it until they fix it. This is what's happening to him. Like these projects may not be going away forever, and he won't be going away forever. It's damage control because he's a product. It's a business. People forget that it's a business, and millions and billions of dollars go into these things. So why would you put all that money on something that people have questionable ideas about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know we talked about this a little bit. I won't go into it too much, but I kind of wish some of this would also go on like Jada Pinkett as well. Because like she's been able to kind of just sit there and kind of like he's been taking all the hits. And I know that like he's the guy that hit him in the face. But there's so much more going on there than just the slap. And like, you know, Will Smith is, we've talked about this before, Owen, too, that he's been emasculated pretty much all of last year. Because and it's partly his fault. Like he's allowed her and her show to go on and talk about all their personal stuff and like put it all out there, which leaves you open for commentary and jokes, and like that is their fault. They've put that out there for themselves. But like there's also this kind of smugness that she kind of has too, where she hasn't been really checked either. Because like I showed you that, I think I told you about that video that has the other angle of like after he slaps him and she's just like laughing. There's no moment of like, there's no moment of like, babe, don't go up there. Like she's proud of her husband for like doing whatever, like doing that for her. So I feel like that should make her look bad too. Like I don't think it should only be him that's like getting all of this stuff. Like, I mean, he is the guy who raised his hand and so on. I get it. But I think this should be a reality check for like both of them, that they're both not invincible in the industry right now. And like what they were given can be
I also think
taken
that
away,
she's kind of accepted her role as.
Oh, what are you saying?
I think she's accepted her role for a while now as, I don't know, kind of like this this martyr of the industry. Like she really does have this kind of narcissistic woe is me mentality, even though she kind of does hold all the cards when it comes to Will's behavior. So I think this is going to affect him a lot more than her. She's really not doing much acting anymore. And if anything, it's just going to get people to tune into her show even more to hear more about it. So really, she kind of comes out on top on this, if you ask me.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
Yeah, and on her show, she gets to control the narrative too, right? So if she decides she wants to talk about it, it's her playground if she wants to kind of go in on this. And I can really, and I can see, even if he doesn't want to, even if Will Smith's like, I don't want to go on your show to talk about this, she'll make it happen. And she will she will say this is the best thing for us to do as a couple.
Oh,
like,
he will do whatever she tells him to do.
Yeah. And you brought up the thing about race too, where you said like, there's certain people that are saying that you can't really talk about this because of that too. And there is a lot of that on the internet, even right after it happened, where it's like, you can't even kind of discuss it on a certain level because it's kind of taken on all these different forms that have gone beyond like just what he did. There's all these other layers to it now that I think it's made it more complicated. It's also made it harder to talk about. And like what you said earlier, like, some of us are journalists, some of us are doing podcasts, and like we complain about how we have to talk about it. But like it was the biggest story on our website all week. Every day I wrote about it. And I didn't feel good about writing about it every day because it just didn't feel, it felt wrong after a certain point. But like that's kind of the industry we're in, and it's a story that keeps growing and keeps developing, and people are interested in it. And but I do think like once time goes by, we were trying to figure out how much time he needs, right? Like our friend Serve said 2 years. I was like, that seems like a long time for him to like disappear. I said the rest of the year. I think the rest of his year is kind of shot. Yep. But I think that if other people can get beyond this, you have people like Mel Gibson who have gotten beyond their problems. And have become successful again. I think Will Smith will be fine at the end of the day, though. He just has to go through the paces like the rest of the people that do stuff like that.
Yep, he's got some work to do.
Yeah, and clearly, and kind of moving on a little bit to someone who's getting kind of forced into retirement. They announced last week Bruce Willis's daughter announced last week that he is retiring or taking a break from acting. Sounds more like retiring. Because he has a cognitive disease called aphasia, which is a language disorder caused by brain damage that affects a person's ability to communicate. This
pretty important as an actor.
Yeah, very important as an actor. So when I started writing for Joe Blow, I kept wondering why he was doing so many straight to like video releases. Why was he doing like all these video on demand stuff? And a lot of the guys that worked there said like, oh, it's kind of like a known thing that he's kind of going through something. He's not all there right now. So like that's what he can get. And I kind of thought they were just kind of exaggerating. But I don't think that's the case now. And like the day after this came out, the LA Times wrote a big story about this that like talked to a bunch of directors who's worked with him in the last few years, other actors who have worked with him. I'm not sure if this is like 100% true, but I feel like they had this story and they're like, hey, we're going to drop this. But if you want to come out ahead of it and reveal this in your own way, then you have that option. And I think they kind of gave that to them because they were like, we have this story and we want to use it. And
I hope that they would have given his family, like, I mean, I hope that they didn't kind of give him an the family an ultimatum and basically say, listen, we're publishing this story, whether you like it or not. Hopefully you can come out and do it. I think he's a well-respected enough actor within the entertainment community in order to gain the respect of the media to say, listen, like they might have had this for a year or two, and hopefully they were just waiting for the family. This is all hypothetical, but I just hope that they kind of were waiting for the family to say, listen, now it's time to go public. This is something that we've been going through. Now you can kind of release something. I really hope they didn't say, listen, family, deal with it and move on.
Yeah. Owen, I'm gonna break your heart here, kid. Newspapers in Hollywood, if they have a story and they sit on it for longer than a week, literally their editor is just gonna be like, someone else got it. So unfortunately, they definitely. I mean, the writing was on the wall. Like I think we talked about it earlier. We made fun of it. Like Rotten Tomatoes had a whole entire category on how Bruce Willis is just what his worst movies were. So like, I mean, we're talking about Bruce Willis here. Like he's an action star, Die Hard. I mean, unbelievable movies. To be doing that, it's like, yo, like we know there's something up. So I just think the writing was on the wall at that point. But yeah, sorry, and they definitely weren't like nice about this. They could give him all the respect in the world by saying, "Hey, we're releasing this," but yeah,
you can always hope. You can always
hope for sure. But like, this is Hollywood, so there is no shot. They were like, you know what? We'll hold the story until you guys can like get it together. It's like, no, we're gonna sell a lot of clicks with this.
Yeah. What do you think, Antonio?
I mean, like the last episode I was on with you guys, we talked a little bit about, the video hell and how like Nicolas Cage and John Cusack and sometimes even Sam Jackson jumps in there for a little while. And who knows what their reasons are. We just found out recently that Nicolas Cage said that he did all those movies to just get out of the massive debt that everyone knew about. But what I did like about his comment was, but I never phoned it in. And he never did. He always was 100% Nicolas Cage. I've watched a few of these Bruce Willis movies that were direct to video, and it is very apparent. It looks like he's phoning it in. Now, when you go back and watch them and those performances, knowing what we know now, is heartbreaking because you're like, oh, wait, no, he's just not being able to perform the way that we're used to seeing Bruce Willis perform. It does look like a lazy performance at first, and then you're like, oh, no, he is going through something. So I'm so glad that the Razzies rescinded that award.
Just for the viewers, after you're done, Antonio, I'm going to list these things for him. These are awesome movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just got one last little point to kind of talk about. Like, I'm good friends with the guys at Derazzled. Their whole podcast is deconstructing the Razzies, and even they were like, "This is a hard one," because when they were doing the coverage on the Razzie Awards. And that Bruce Willis had his own category. Yeah, the face value is, it's funny because here's this guy fallen from grace, blah, blah, blah. And they were even on the fence of like even kind of talking about it. This is before it even came out. And now that it's out, they're like, yeah, they definitely need to rescind that award. Like the Razzies is fun, but it also can be a little bit bullyish.
Mean-spirited a little bit.
It needs to do its homework. That was the point that we were trying to make.
Yeah, I think so too. What are you going to say, Jack, too?
I was just going to list some movies for the people out there. Just remember that he is a fantastic actor. Die Hard, like I mentioned. Armageddon, Pulp Fiction, The Fifth Element, Split, Red 2 and Red 1. Let's not forget those phenomenal movies at the tail end of his career.
Those are great.
Those are fantastic.
Tears of the Sun, Hostage, 12 Monkeys. Let me see here. Let's go on a little bit longer here.
Sin City.
Sin City, The Expendables. Once Upon a Time in Venice. Not a really good one, but that just popped up on the feed.
I enjoyed that one. I actually enjoyed that movie.
Dude, like now that I'm looking at his IMDb, it's like holy shit! This guy's got he's rivaling Danny Trejo in appearances.
I enjoyed Looper a lot. I thought he was really good in that.
Yeah. Looper's great. Looper's like me.
I mean, do we want to do a round robin and see who has like their favorite Bruce Willis performance?
Oh yeah. Let's do it.
Ooh, all right. Yeah, I can do that. I think it's deserving.
Yeah.
This guy was like an original OG actor for our time, at least.
You just listed so many great ones, but yeah, I'm gonna come out and say that 12 Monkeys blew me away. Like 12 Monkeys is the one that like really showed me like, oh, this guy's got range. He's just not John McClane, or a talking baby. Like this guy's got range. He's got Terry Gilliam backing him up. I mean, there's that scene when he hears Blueberry Hill in the car with Madeline Stowe as they're driving. And you just see his face kind of just go through this wave of emotions that he hasn't heard music in like 40 years. And I remember being like 15 years old in the theater seeing that. That scene made me cry. And I didn't know why. I was like 15 years old. I'm like, oh my God, why am I crying? This scene is so amazing. That performance is just awesome. And that's my favorite Bruce Willis role.
Nice.
I feel like I'm going to copy you. That sucks. Well, I'm going to go with 12 Monkeys too, but I want to give credit where credit is due to him because I think he's underrated in this sense where like when I watch something like The Sixth Sense, even though like Haley Joel Osment and Toni Collette get a lot of the credit for that, there's this kind of like quiet, subdued thing that he does in some of his movies. He does it in The Sixth Sense that it's also pretty gripping too. Like it kind of shows that you don't have to, everything's not about grand theatrics, right? There's a lot of things that he does in some of his work that is completely underrated. I don't think he actually gets a lot of the credit that he probably deserves as an actor. I mean, I know he's known for being like, he's known for like the John McClane stuff and he can be a badass, but like, I was going through this last week when this all came out and I was like looking at his list of movies and I was like, no, he's a fantastic actor. He's done some really great stuff. 12 Monkeys is probably my favorite performance by him. If I had to go with the film though, I mean, it has to be Die Hard. I watch Die Hard every Christmas. So it's such a part of my childhood and my current life. So, but like performance wise, I think it is 12 Monkeys. But he has a pretty amazing filmography up until, he started doing other stuff. Like, and I think he should get all the credit for some of that too.
Yeah, no, I have to go. To this day, I still can't tell if it's a good movie or it's just a really nostalgic movie for me, but Hostage. Fucking love Hostage. Ben Foster in that movie is so terrifying, but Bruce Willis, I don't know, just great movie. Shout out my dad. We watch that all the time. We would watch that all the time. But that movie, for some reason, just was awesome. I think about it sometimes when I look at like big houses and all the security systems. So I'd definitely go with Hostage for sure. Also, shout out to Bruce Willis because he was like the one white guy in the 90s who was just balding, just unapologetically balding, and was still killing it. Like he finally shaved it, but like he was holding on for so long, and he rocked it, dude. He rocked the hell out of it. So go him. And also, it's nice to know that he'll always be in the discussion during his good movies, like because Die Hard will always be a topic of Christmas, like, is it a Christmas movie or not? Yeah. So that's always nice to know that he'll always be discussed in his highest point from now on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I'm surprised you guys didn't mention this one. Cop Out, just such a great movie. So, my favorite one of Bruce Willis, I'm just going to have to go with Pulp Fiction. The scene that sticks out to me, too, is that really makes me just believe in his character and just the performance and the emotion that he's evoking is really just the scene when she forgets his father's watch that at the old place and just his willingness to go back into danger when he knows he's about, like he could die at any moment. And he's like, listen, I'm going to go back to the first place they're checking. And then also just the scene in the dungeon. Not only is it disturbing, but the acting is incredible for that. And just that whole movie has so many great elements, and he stands out for that one, and I'll have to give him that. Looper, I love that movie too. So congrats to Bruce, and just hope I really appreciate his family support and everything, and I hope that he gets the help that he needs. And I mean, the community and everyone is surrounding him with support. So I think it's going to be an easier road for him now that it's a little bit more open. And as tough as it is to come out with something like that, I think people are all going to be surrounding him with love and just getting him and the help he needs.
Yeah, I love seeing this online. Yeah, I know. I love seeing it online when this kind of happened, that most people were all very supportive and just feeling nostalgic for his really good work. That's kind of what I saw. And like, I had a friend that emailed me. They emailed me Variety, and it said Bruce Willis, his career in pictures, and they were like, "This is what they do for people when they die. Like, why are they doing this?" And I was like, "Well, like a part of his career is essentially over, so it does feel like, you know, the guy that we knew, the guy that we kind of grew up watching, that guy probably is not gonna be back anymore." So I kind of get why it feels
we'll see
like
a lot of producing credits from him moving forward.
Maybe. I mean, he might. I mean, I know he. Yeah, maybe EPs, and I know that he has 10 movies coming out this year because he filmed a lot of like those like direct to video things. So he's not going anywhere. And you know, knowing what I know now, like I talked about this on Facebook, but I worked Comic-Con in 2018 when they had Glass there, and they had a whole panel for that movie, and he seemed like he didn't know what was really going on, and he didn't sound like himself. And at the time when we were watching it, we thought like maybe he was just kind of drunk, or like we didn't know. But like in retrospect, knowing what we know now, because that was 2018, he could have easily been feeling the effects of that, and like that kind of made me feel bad looking back. Like, oh, that could have been what that was. Rather than, you know, us thinking like, oh, he's wasted up there, and you know, and that probably wasn't even the case at all.
That was probably super tough for him to be up there and try and hide necessarily some of the symptoms that he was feeling and still be present.
Yeah, and because they were saying that, you know, like they would give him a script for some of these things, and they would have like 25, 30 pages for him to do, and then they would realize like, oh, he can't do any of this. Like his people were like, no, you only have him for like a day. So then they had to cut down all of his stuff and just give him like a day's worth of work. And some of them his people weren't being honest with the directors and stuff about what was going on. They were just saying, oh, like, you know, it's just time and like all this. They were making excuses, which I guess, you know, if they're trying to, I want to assume that they were trying to protect him. I know some people have said that it seems like they were using him a bit to like just kind of like push him out there to make movies. I hope that's not the case. I hope they were just trying to protect his privacy and, you know, and didn't want to reveal it then. But yeah, I will say, like, you know, I love seeing like all the support he got online, and I think most of us are gonna like we just did right now. We just did like a whole round robin of things and with his movies, and we all have like a certain Bruce Willis movie or performance that we love. And
I want to shout out his cameo in Ocean's 12 when he just almost ruins the whole thing. It's just so good. His interaction with like Julia Roberts playing Julia Roberts, like that whole sort of scene was just.
So I thought that was the only one for years that liked the whole like, oh, Julia Roberts looks like Julia Roberts joke in that movie. Because I think I was the only one laughing in the theater when we saw it.
So meta.
But I thought it was funny, and like he was really good in that scene too. And he's actually he's in Grindhouse too. We're gonna talk about that later. He's also in that. So just a lot of really good stuff that he's done. And yeah, like I said, I hope like he just finds the time to like kind of be with his family. And like, you know, I did hear that like you can treat this and you can kind of get to a point where you're like able to be okay and communicate. It depends on how long he's had it and what was the cause. Because they didn't say whether it was a tumor or a hit to the head or a stroke or anything like that. They wouldn't reveal what it was that caused it. It just depends on what his diagnosis was when they, you know, told him. And that's not our business either. So like they got what they need to get out. The people know. He has his family support, and he has the support of a bunch of fans who love his work. So I think that's great.
I mean, he's getting older, so regardless, he's going to be deteriorating.
It's his life.
At a certain pace, it's life. So just our thoughts go out to him. I mean, obviously it's proven that we've all loved everything that he's been in. Well, mostly everything that he's been in. So.
Yeah. Well, now for something not as fun to talk about. So
I'm leaving this all up to you guys.
We've been talking about Morbius, I think, since we started our podcast, because
my god,
it's been delayed so much, and it had so many different release dates. And It finally opened this weekend.
We finally saw it.
And it opened
First thing
to
I'll say, net profit, baby. We are net profits, baby.
Unless it fucking craters next weekend, and I think it's going to crater like a motherfucker. At least here, it's going to fall apart at the box office this weekend. Well, we should have known something was up when we saw the 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. But I was like, you know what? Venom didn't get good reviews either, and that was kind of fun. It wasn't great, but it was fun. So maybe Morbius could be fun. And it wasn't even fun. It was just bad. It wasn't like so bad that it's good. It was just awful. It did open at number 1 this weekend to $39.1 million. But why I think it's going to crater next week is because attendance fell by 25% on Saturday from Friday. That means like word of mouth already wasn't good. And it got a C+ cinema score from opening night moviegoers, which is not good for a movie like this. Jack said something about the net profit and all that stuff. It was cheap to make. It was $75 million to make. It opened to $84 million.
That's got to be excluding marketing costs. They probably spent like $100 million on marketing the shit out of this movie.
Right, and marketing goes up when you keep delaying it and giving it a new release date because they have to like put more ads and stuff out. So I'm assuming like Sony was on a winning streak through the pandemic because they had like the Venom sequel that did well. They had Ghostbusters that did well. Of course, they had Spider-Man with the Marvel assist that did well. I'm just going to start out by saying this, and you guys can talk about the movie a little bit. I do not trust Sony to work with these things on their own. Like, not anymore. I don't like them left to their own devices with this stuff. They don't know what they're doing. They're kind of like Warner Brothers with the DC stuff. And unless they have proper help, they can't get it right. And that's all I'm going to say for now. But I will let Owen or Jack jump into what they liked, nothing, or what they didn't like.
First, put some respect on Warner Brothers' name. All right, just put a little respect there. Okay, just a little bit.
They're figuring it out.
They don't have Marvel helping them.
They don't. No.
Secondly,
this is rough. You can't think of a good. Can you think of a good thing?
Edited this film. Who agreed to the sequencing of scenes in this film? What the actual hell?
So like you see the trailer and you see the part where he sticks his hand in the bat thing and everything. Spoiler alert, because no one's gonna see it. It's the first scene in the movie, and I'm like, did they like give the wrong reel to the theater or like something? What the hell? And then it flips back to childhood, where this movie, all right, just in total, this movie holds no weight to what the movie wanted to do. It wanted to create a friendship, and then disdain for not helping. That didn't work because there was no interpersonal connection there at all besides the backstory. The chick, I mean, she was there.
Yep, she was there.
she was part of the plot for a little bit. She was the person saying, "Don't do it." And then I remember you saying it, Gaze, like Jared Leto just like took it way too seriously as a person, as Michael Morbius.
Yes.
I felt that if he like took it just a little bit less serious of like all like the brooding around, or if they gave this movie like 40 more minutes to like actually breathe out like his.
No,
okay.
Don't need 40 more minutes.
just calm down.
If you gave it like 30 more minutes of actual like dialogue to like build up like his why he is like this, other than the fact that he has a rare blood disease. All right, Owen. All right. Anywho, yeah, dude, Sony has no idea what they're doing with this universe. It is like it's hilarious that they also have 2 post-credit scenes, and they actually put Vulture in this universe now due to the Doctor Strange's spell in this. It was purple stuff, so it had to be No Way Home.
Yeah,
it was Purple Sky. So they Marvel definitely said, you know what, you guys need a new one who is like still like relevant. Take Michael Keaton. We don't need him anymore. We're good. You're good. All right. So you take him and you meet him. So and then they also mention Venom. So I think, and then also they have Kraven coming up. So actually, I think they're trying to build up their own Sinister Six.
Oh, just don't.
I mean, hey, dude, the Craven. Right, not to go on to other prospects of Sony, but Craven the Hunter could be good with Aaron John Paul Johnson, whatever.
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Thank you. Yes, whatever the hell his name is.
And then I didn't see the movie, guys.
The cool. I like the CGI was good. I thought like the concept of like all of his like abilities was pretty dope to watch. But like other than that, like I'll watch it if I need to fall asleep, and I'm not talking about the movies that I like to fall asleep to. It's like if I really just need to fall asleep. So, I'll take the L on this one, boys. I really tried my best to stay excited for it. Jared Leto, we had it with the Joker, man. We had it, but Warner Brothers fumbled the ball for us there. So I'm just gonna go into a little deep thought and let Owen just trample all over me right now.
Antonio, you would have thought there for a second.
I just wanted to say, like,
oh yeah,
I didn't see the movie. I didn't see the movie, and you're really doing a great job in convincing me not to. What is like the scale of Jared Leto brooding in this film? Like, where are we at with the brooding?
I would say a good every 30 seconds that go, every 2 minutes that go by in this movie, you could get equivalent to 30 seconds of brooding.
Yeah,
okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
See, you know what I found out today that made me more mad about his performance is that the director said that he was so method on set that he actually would walk around with like the canes and like limp to the bathroom. And then they were like, well, you're taking too long to get back to set. So then they gave him a wheelchair so he could still feel like he was like weak when he was Michael Morbius. And I was like, why? This is why people don't like you. Like, and that made me more upset that like he took his part in this so seriously, because you look at like Matt Smith, who I don't watch Doctor Who, but he was good in this. He's actually clearly having fun. Like whatever movie he was in was a good movie. Like I would watch that movie. I would watch that movie that he was performing in, because he actually was like good, but also realized that this is fucking ridiculous. I'm gonna have fun. And Jared Leto,
I wish he was alive. He stayed alive because he was the only good part.
He's the only good thing about it. And Jared Leto was just like, everything is just very serious. You can tell that he took this very seriously, and it's just frustrating to watch because it's like, what did you read and what script did you get? Maybe you got a really good script, because it is clear that they put this movie to like a meat grinder and cut it the fuck up. Like it's really it's edited so poorly. Like you can tell, and then like what makes me more upset too, with all the delays, they had time to like work with that
test
editing.
screen.
They had all the time,
like,
and they didn't do anything with it.
Did they not test screen it? Did they not get any reaction to like of anything of sort? Like, this is Suicide Squad level horrible editing.
No, they were riding high on that Spider-Man No Way Home money. They were just like, they didn't care. They were like, we don't care. We're invincible. And
the last time I was on the show, we talked about how they spent so much time on Monday they could have just made it over again, and that was kind of like our joke on that last episode, and do it with Ryan Reynolds instead, because they could have. But I think if they wanted to fix this, they could have had Jared Leto pull his face off at the end to reveal Robert Downey Jr. and his character from Tropic Thunder, and then the whole movie would have been fixed. Being like, oh, I love this movie now, Oscar.
Cut.
This is perfect.
I will not take this slander of comic book movies, but it is deserved.
Owen, what are your feelings about this wonderful?
Yeah. All right. So Gaius and I saw this on Sunday, and we walked in with pretty much super low expectations. It started with us kind of begrudgingly driving to the theater, and it's like we both were saying we've never been less excited to actually go and see a movie and sit down. Also, to the audience that we watched it with, we had a group in the front that they laughed at like everything that was like supposed to be kind of cool. They just erupted in laughter. And there were definitely a few moments where I was laughing, like the scene where he's jumping off the building and flying. I thought that was hilariously bad. But basically just anything about the movie. It's like, there's really no character development. We've talked about movies that are just one specific splice in time that do a really good job. This one kind of has that, but it also references some back flashes or flashbacks and does a terrible job with it. The acting by those kids is awful. Doesn't really produce like any sort of entertaining inner sort of character love, or why is this Matt Smith's character rich? No idea. Why is he the benefactor of the lab?
That was what I had.
Morbius has invented fake blood that can be going to like on the front lines in the army. That's sweet, but like, did he do it to get rich, or does he actually want to help people? Who knows? We really have no idea what these characters' like wants and needs are, and that makes it even more infuriating when these two best friends who have a completely rare disease, but they're best friends. The second that Matt Smith's character gets it, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to kill Jared Leto." Because he's like, I don't know, he's like, yeah, you know what? Oh, you don't want to kill people and drink their blood? Well, I'm going to kill you now. It's like, well, haven't you been friends for 40 years, like 35 years? Like, that makes absolutely no sense.
And that's what I'm saying. There's no weight to anything that went on.
Yeah.
And then it's just like the quick cuts are bad. I thought the slow-mo action was just very obtuse and just unneeded.
Yeah, so
I thought the character that played Martine was just badly written. Also, like, who dies and like we don't even see her get like slashed or something, and then she's like, oh yeah, you can drink my blood now and go red. And they tried to like make it some sort of like thing. It's like, what happens when you go red? I'm like, well, that's not a thing. Like, that's not like some sort of cool thing that you can now like, oh, I'm going to go red or go blue. It's like, no, it's not the Matrix, man. Like, this isn't some sort of cool thing you're going to put out there. Just this whole thing was so lopsided, and the seriousness that Jared Leto took it pushed against how like fantastical like the thought is of this freaking vampire. Also, with the vampire, they make all these jokes that it's not like he's not that kind of vampire, but then he bites the girl at the end and she becomes a freaking vampire. Like, they literally just like contradict themselves over everything that they think this movie is, and then they are like, this is not what it is, and then they're like, oh, we're gonna do it. And like I thought also the FBI characters, they were bad. Tyrese doesn't do anything to the story except just kind of look at Jared Leto and say, oh, like they have no reaction to when he like his face changes and turns into a vampire. They're just like, all right, you're gonna stay locked up in this fucking public jail. Like, what the fuck? Like, and then his partner has this comic relief sort of thing that's not funny. Obviously, he had way more lines that might have set this up. Dude, you're a federal investigator. You're not cracking jokes about someone's blood being drained, and you just reading the word insanguinated. Bro, go back to school, dude. Like, there's just so many different things about this movie that are just laughable. And it also has every single freaking movie trope. Like, oh, I'm going to try and find my cure for something. Test it on an animal. Oh, look, the animal's dead. I'm going to go do something. Look back. Oh, my gosh, it's alive. It worked. Like, just all of these different things that are from so many other movies, they just stole it, put it in this, cut it to shit, and just made a fucking pile of terribleness and CGI bullshit. Like, it's just – I literally was checking my watch halfway through, and I was like, I can't – like, even halfway through, I was like, first of all, the story hasn't done anything, so how is it even going to end? And I also can't wait for it to end. It makes no sense. Like, gosh, I couldn't stay further away from it. And like Gaius, you and I were talking about this too. The chances that a sequel are going to get made are pretty slim just from the reaction to it. And also, please, can we just get rid of any post-credit scene? Just fucking show me in the movie or don't show it at all. I'm so tired of sitting through the credits just to see a freaking splice of Michael Keaton or something that I don't give a shit about. Like, I'm so tired of that. Gosh.
I liked your rant more than the movie, so bravo.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. That's yeah.
That was good.
Well, because it was funny. People were asking me about it. People were like, what'd you do over the weekend? I was like, oh, I saw a movie. Which one? Morbius. They're like, how was it? I was like, well, do you have 10 minutes for me to just go off?
Yeah, I'm not gonna even try to top what you just did. That said everything I wanted to say. I will add that it feels very dated. Like, it feels like it's like a huge step back as far as like quality. It looks like it could have come out in like 2001, 2002.
Like the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, it looks cheap. I mean, I guess they want to keep it cheap. Whatever, $75 million, they can easily recoup that. But it just feels dated, and like I like there were no memorable action scenes in it. And nothing felt like there were no real stakes involved at all. So I never really felt any tension or suspense or like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. Like it's a completely like flat movie. Like, it doesn't build to anything, and you could tell that they cut the climax like the most. because it's so rushed and thrown together that I don't. And like you talk about Tyrese too, I think they cut a lot of his stuff too. Because I watched the trailer again, and he's in the trailer stuff.
Dude, half the stuff in the trailer isn't even in the movie.
No, yeah. I actually think that Tyrese actually has a bigger part in the overall story that they just completely cut out, because there's certain camera angles and scenes where the camera looks at him, and Tyrese doesn't just look like an annoyed or suspicious FBI agent. He looks like there's a little bit more to his thing. Unfortunately, no one knows any back history really on Morbius, other than the fact that he was his first appearance was in Spider-Man 101, and he's an anti-hero. But
that's what pisses me off the most, Jack, because for an origin story, this is an origin story where we're supposed to get to know who the character is. Morbius is typically is not a well-known character, and so I was expecting to kind of understand, is he good? Is he bad? Is he an anti-hero? I understand that, does he want to help people? But I literally left this movie knowing nothing about the character. I still don't really know what his motivations are. I still don't know anything about what they think about it. In this world where maybe Venom exists or maybe other superheroes exist, they took to seeing a guy transform into a vampire very well. Now, all of these things that just didn't make any sense is not the purpose of an origin story. And that just proves, Gaius, to your point about how Sony really does not have the foundation to create something like that, because there's literally freaking proof. Iron Man, Captain America, there's so many origin stories out there, even Wolverine, all of these things that is a fucking blueprint of how to do an origin story, and they just were like, nah, let's do something different.
I will defend that is in the sense that they got screwed, because Marvel has even before Marvel was Marvel had Disney to make a good solid film. They knew the recipe and they knew how to do it. Yes, it was the first comic book movies and that were boom, that's the industry standard. And then Sony wants to get in the game, but they already sold off all the characters to Marvel, so they can only keep these certain people. So they're just fishing for
something.
Just fishing
I read on Deadline that Sony has the rights to 900 Spider-Man characters. So whatever they want to try to milk for a profit or for money, I think they're going to do it. But it's ridiculous, because I think they feel like we have the rights to these people, but who cares what kind of movie we make about them? Cool, Kraven the Hunter could be good. I actually agree with Jack. If they actually do that right, because that character's story is interesting and it could be good. It could be good.
It's a very good adversary, yeah.
But then they're also doing Madam Web with Dakota Johnson. It's no one knows who she is, and that means you're just kind of just throwing shit together, and hoping for the best. And that's why I compared. Yeah, exactly. That's why I compared it to Warner Brothers, because I guess old Warner Brothers, because I kind of feel like they're just okay, we got to make money, and we have the rights to these characters. Let's not waste them. But just because you have 900 people you could toy around with and make movies of doesn't mean you should. Everyone doesn't need a movie. Everyone doesn't need a movie, and I don't think Morbius needed his own film. I told Owen, the Spider-Man animated show did Morbius better than this movie did. An animated cartoon in the 90s actually did his story so much better than they did in this movie. And so there is a good movie there, but it's just I don't think they care enough to kind of do this stuff.
It's not that they don't care enough. It's that when they try and
do this, they see that there's universes that they have to abide by now. So it's not like they can just just mention Spider-Man openly and be yeah, we have a Spider-Man too. It's no, they got to check with Disney. They got to make sure it counts in the storyline and the multiverse and all this stuff. While in Warner Brothers' hands, they're just whatever. They just don't understand that your directors need to make the movie. The studio doesn't need to make the movie.
Right.
But it's unfortunate because Sony's also handcuffed by Marvel. But if they just admitted that, hey, Marvel, we need your help to make these movies that of these unknown characters, we need to actually give them substantial weight, I would say that yeah, they'd probably make a lot more if Marvel actually actively was we got you, we'll get you some help. And they were you know what, we'll take less money because in the end it'll help all of our universe. Now we'll just have all of these guys in it. Because it is cool. A fucking living vampire, kind of cool. And in the comics, he's friends with Moon Knight. and they mess around and have a witty banter. Even Daredevil, there are characters that like he could be conversing with, or could have been brought in a different way. But yeah, no, it's like what Owen's saying. Like Owen's rant was perfect. Like nothing about this gave him any anti-hero motivation, any doctor motivation, like French. Nothing of this movie like gave them anything. They really just wanted to get to the point where he turns into a vampire. He flies around and uses his echo sounds. Like that's really it.
Yep. I'm going to pull Antonio on this for just a second because I think the problem with a lot of this stuff is all the universe building, and I think that kind of hurts a lot of these movies because I think everyone feels like it's necessary to, like, oh, we have to make this kind of expanded universe and connect all these things together. I would like to know like what you think about that. Do you think? I mean, I know that sometimes they've done it right and it can work, but I think it kind of is an Achilles heel for a lot of these movies that they kind of think about that before they even think about like the individual story itself.
The way I look at it, because I've had this conversation with a lot of these intellectual property movies, not necessarily comic book movies. I mean, Fast and the Furious kind of does it in a way. Luckily, it has a built-in audience for the most part. It reminds me of like when you're a kid and you're playing like Ninja Turtles or G.I. Joe or whatever you played with as a kid, and you spent so much time setting up the world that you're going to do your battle in. You're setting up bases, you're setting up like tree forts, you're setting up booby traps. And by the time it's ready to play, your friends got to go home because you spent too much time fucking around.
That's so true.
Oh my god, that's so perfect.
That's what I think about how all this mismatch of universe building and not being on the same page, like Jack says, really fucks these franchises over. You know, and it leads my little tinfoil hat to think that, does Disney have like agent provocateurs and saboteurs in the rooms and in the offices of Sony that really just kind of collapse these projects so they can come in and swipe it all for themselves later? It's the long game. They're playing chess, not checkers. So I think you're getting this kind of like rush to get a product out from Sony. But I don't think Sony realizes that there is a much bigger mouse in the house that can do this job a lot better. And they're going to be like, yeah, make your Morbius movie. It'll be fun. Yeah, sure. We'll tie in a Spider-Man something later on.
Exactly.
Guarantee you 2 years from now, you're going to see a lot of those characters that we're talking about now find their way into whatever extended universe that Disney Marvel is doing. And they're going to do a much better job if they can. So it's in their best interest to let these properties collapse under Sony because they can do them better. Perfect example is look what Amazing Spider-Man. Like no one gave a shit about those two movies, and now everyone's rooting that Andrew Garfield is back in this thing. Granted, that's like a Sony co-op, but again, like you had to let a franchise fail to bring it back and succeed. I think there's a long game going on there.
It's funny you use the word rush when Morbius, we've known about it for a year and it still didn't come out.
Yeah, but just from listening to the way you guys are talking about it, this was probably the longest running rushed film ever because you know that whatever this final product was, like he said, there was probably many, many versions of it, and that whatever they released to you guys to see was a very rushed last minute tampering just to try and fix whatever the fuck they did with it.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Exactly what happened.
That's completely what happened.
And one thing I can see connecting the end, like their long game, what you're talking about, like say if like Kraven the Hunter does like ish, okay, that's their perfect thing to then bring Black Panther's world out more because Kraven the Hunter is in Africa, so boom, now you have Aaron Taylor Johnson like as a great actor, and now on Disney's side of the things of here, this character Kraven can be under Marvel now instead of Sony. So I think they're not seeing the long game is a very, 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 very fair point.
Yeah, that's kind of concerning too, because like not so much Jared Leto. Like if we never get another Morbius out as him as Morbius, I'd be fine with that. But you do have people like Aaron Tyler Johnson. I'll even give it to Dakota Johnson too, because she is good and outside of 50 Shades of Grey and that stuff. She's a good actress. It's like you have these like talented people that you're having like headline these projects. I want them to do well because I want to see those people in those roles doing well. But I kind of agree with what you're saying. Like if something like Kraven does like okay-ish, is Marvel like, all right, like you guys can kind of like fiddle with that, and that will help you fiddle with him too. So like we can kind of make it better than what you did. And I kind of do agree with the whole like kind of long game that they might be doing. I can see like someone in their office just gonna like just let them fuck up, just let them fuck up real quick. We'll get it back. Don't worry. He'll be in a year. We'll get it back. Just let them fuck up. I can totally see that.
Like you're getting daily texts from an intern. They're doing it. They're cutting the movie.
They're cutting the movie.
Don't stop them.
And I'm not even fucking around. Like I really think like Disney, we've learned, has the money to be patient. You know, they wanted Star Wars for years. They had Star Wars rides in Disneyland in the 80s. They were trying to get that for years. They can wait. They got plenty of shit to make themselves money while they wait, you know. It's just it's a business and they are fucking great at it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just pump out a few more live action shit and then they'll wait for what they actually really want.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have nothing else to add about. I mean, like, so. Oh, my brother, who usually sees like anything with me, I asked if he wanted to go with Owen and I, and he was just like, no. And then when I told him how bad it was, and he was like, well, do you think they'll ever use him again? I was like, not this iteration. And if he does pop up again, he's definitely not getting his own movie. I mean, if they want to use him as a supporting player, I guess I don't know what kind of contract Jared Leto signed or what he signed up for. If he signed up for multiple movies. How that worked out for him. He doesn't seem like a guy that would sign up for multiple movies.
I mean, he probably signed it as Morbius, and he's like, fuck, you know, he's so method.
He's so method. He signed Michael Morbius' name. But yeah, I it's just so bad, and I'm kind of glad this time that people are responding with their dollar because, like I said, I think that this movie is going to fall apart this weekend, at least here in the States. You know, I think Sonic is going to knock it off the #1 spot this weekend.
Yeah,
in a big way, and. I think Variety said that they'll be lucky if it makes $100 million here. And a movie that opens to $39 million should easily like at least limp to $100 million. And that's not going to happen. I don't think. I think it's going to like completely fall apart. And then maybe like Sony will have like a moment, I guess, where they're like, oh, we fucked this up. And they're not going to learn though. They're not really going to, because they'll look at this one loss and look at all the wins they've had recently. And they're like, well, we messed up on this one, but look at like, you know, the Venom sequel did well, and it got bad reviews, and look, it made a lot of money. So, like, I think they kind of see their wins as like an excuse to be like, okay, we can take this one L and move on. And I think that's what they're going to do with this.
I'll end it with, I mean, Gaius, you and I were kind of talking about it on the way out of the movie, like things we actually liked. The only thing that we really kind of came up with was Matt Smith did a great job having fun with it, and I think that made the movie slightly more enjoyable was his sort of provocative nature of, I'm just going to kind of fuck around. But also I did think that the animation of his transformation into the vampire, like sort of those quick, like I can't hold it in kind of things, like that was pretty seamless every single time. So I think that was pretty good. But I also didn't really like, I mean, even just those close-up shots of Morbius was just not really good. But the transformation from human to vampire and then also back was done pretty seamlessly. I think that they did well on that in terms of animation.
Yeah. So what we're saying, guys, if you want to spend $13 or more to watch seamless vampire transformations, go see Morbius.
Yeah, seriously. Wait till it comes out on Disney Plus if you're ever going to see it. And then in that case, just take an hour and go for a walk instead.
That's really nice if you think it's going to be put on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah, it's Sony. Yeah, they're not going to put it on that. Yeah, even though it's Marvel. Yeah.
No, yeah, they're contractually obligated to put it on there, but they're like, you know what, we can just like leave this one in the archives.
It's like, whoops. All right, well, now we're going to get to talking about the movie that's actually good. Grindhouse actually turns 15 on April 6th. So it came out April 6, 2007. And in case you guys, I know you guys have heard of it, in case the listeners haven't heard of it, Grindhouse is a film written and directed by Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino, and it was presented as a double feature, combining Rodriguez's Planet Terror, a horror comedy about a group of survivors who battle zombie-like creatures, and Tarantino's Death Proof, a slasher about a murderous stuntman who kills young women with modified vehicles. This is like a throwback to kind of like exploitation cinema, and when they used to kind of show these kind of double features, and this movie comes complete with like fake trailers made to give you the same feeling that you're watching like a real double feature. The movie, when it came out, got really, really good reviews when it came out, but it sadly was a commercial failure, and we can kind of talk about maybe why that happened. The filmmakers have their own thoughts about why that happened. I'm just going to assume that it was just too niche for certain people to go see it. A movie this long. But I think it is kind of one of their movies too. I think over time has kind of built a bigger like cult following in the years since it's been released, and a lot of people appreciate it. It was funny. I put that poll up, and we can talk about this later. But I put that poll up asking like, what feature do people like more? Is it Planet Terror or Death Proof? And Antonio was like, I'm just going to save it for the show. But I was actually looking online to see which one people liked more. And back in the day, I felt like Planet Terror got like a lot of the love. But then I was reading now, and it seems like people are appreciating Death Proof a little bit more. But yeah, it's something that we can kind of get into.
Do you think that's the Tarantino hype?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we can talk about it when we get to Death Proof. I love Quentin Tarantino as a writer, and there's some good stuff like dialogue wise in Death Proof. Like it's, but some people have it. Some people have issues with it, and I get what some of the issues are. But and Planet Terror is certainly more fun as far as it moves a little quicker. But yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you guys: one, did you guys see it when it came out? What you guys kind of thought about it, and kind of what your feelings are about it now. And I'll throw it to Antonio first because he kind of had to endure that Morbius discussion. So we'll let you go first on this one.
Oh yeah, man! I saw it when it came out. I was there opening night. Saw the midnight show because, with the exception of Reservoir Dogs, there isn't a Tarantino film I hadn't seen in the theater. And with the exception of El Mariachi, there hadn't been a Robert Rodriguez movie that I hadn't seen in the theater, at least one that was aimed for my audience. I don't count like Shorts and Lava Girl and the Spy Kids movies, as fun as they are for kids. But I mean, this is my territory here. Grindhouse, exploitation, cult films, and literally two of my favorite directors. You had Sin City 2 years before this. And Sin City was just an amazing feat of digital cinema excellence that Robert Rodriguez had really put a lot into. And a little side story is, Tarantino directed that one segment in A Dame to Kill For, where Benicio del Toro and Clive Owen are in the car. He directed it on digital because he wanted to see if he wanted to shoot Death Proof on digital. And not film. It was like his experiment. And obviously he stuck with film. But there were already seeds of this film permeating. And I used to read all the, Ain't It Cools and blogs and Entertainment Weekly. So when we knew that this was coming out, it was like, how many days until Christmas? It was something that we were just biting to get. And it was an amazing cinematic experience. However, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, I'm sure, when Death Proof ended and the credits rolled, like half the audience got up and left. They really thought that was the end of the movie. They didn't understand the concept of double feature.
Like there's another movie coming, yeah.
There's another movie coming. Well, I didn't see any Tarantino stuff in it. My mom was that way. She was like, oh, where's the Tarantino stuff? Like, Mom, it's 2 movies. It's a double feature. It's like an old Grindhouse feature. So there's a little bit of that until I think the misconception of what it was and why it financially failed. But for someone like me, man, I ate it up. I think we saw it maybe 3 or 4 times. I bought multiple versions on physical media. It is a movie that I just absolutely love. And we can get into the critical parts later, but that's my take on it.
Yeah. I'll go on this one quick. I also saw it on opening night, and not at a midnight showing, but it was pretty late. It was like 10 o'clock or 11. And given how packed our theater was, I thought that it was going to be a big hit because it was a pretty packed theater. But I think everyone that kind of wanted to see it rushed out on that Friday, and it just didn't reach beyond the people that really wanted it. And like I said, and I agree with you. During my screening, people got up after the first movie ended and started to leave because they were like, "Oh, it's over." And they were like, "Well, what happened to that other stuff?" That you could hear them talking. And then they started running like the trailers and stuff, and they were like, "What's this?" Like no one really got like what it was. And I was trying to think from like the marketing materials and stuff, like the trailers, if they gave you an impression of what the movie was going to be. And I guess they did like a little bit, but it's a hard movie to really market to if you're not into this kind of thing. In retrospect, I can't really see it really being received incredibly well by a mainstream audience now. But back then, I was like, yo, you have two directors at the height of their powers. Like Robert Rodriguez, like you said, is coming off of Sin City. Quentin Tarantino is Quentin Tarantino. So like you have these two working together. I really thought that even though this isn't what, people might be expecting, I thought their names alone could kind of sell anything really. And I thought they could really sell this. And it's a shame that, I'm glad that it has like a life now. But yeah, I remember after that opening weekend and like asking anyone if they saw it. No one I knew saw it. And then a few people that did see it didn't quite understand it. They didn't get the humor either. And then there were the few people that complained that it was too long because it was, it's two movies. It's 191 minutes if you're sitting in the theater watching it. That's why, this was made by the Weinstein Company back in the day. And Harvey Weinstein, like after that opening weekend, he was just so dismayed by how little it made. He decided like overseas to like split the movies up and release like Planet Terror on its own and Death Proof on its own. He's like, well, we should have done that here. There was this whole big debate, like, kind of like what they did with like Kill Bill, because Kill Bill was supposed to be like one long movie and they decided to release it in 2 volumes instead. From a financial standpoint, he's not wrong. I don't think a lot of people want to sit in the theater for 191 minutes. I was cool with it. Antonio was cool with it. Most people were cool with it. That really liked this kind of thing. But I think like it just wasn't. If you weren't into it, if you weren't into this kind of filmmaking, this kind of like exploitation, like all this kind of throwback to like cult films, you really weren't going to get it, and it wasn't going to be for you. But I was kind of happy as a fan to have it because I understood everything that they were doing and appreciated all the like everything they put into it too. And just knowing how much those two guys in general, like how much they love filmmaking and they love those style of films in general, it was cool that they got to make their own version of these things that they grew up watching and what inspired them to make films too. And you can see that throughout the entire thing. Like this is made with like love and respect for these types of motion pictures. And that's why I loved it. And I loved it then on opening night and I love it now still. What about you, Owen?
Well, I did not see it on opening night. It was just one of those things that I kind of followed and revisited once I had seen more of Tarantino's things. Robert Rodriguez was someone who was not necessarily really on my radar, especially since I got more into movies as I grew a little bit older. And a lot of these classic films were from when I was a lot younger. So it was just one of those things that I revisited and I was able to appreciate it, I think, a little bit more rather than really sort of dissecting it at that time when it came out. I was kind of coming at it very subjectively with the just thought of, is this going to be a good movie and do I enjoy it because I enjoy these directors, rather than they're both coming off of big successes and do they write well together? Is their style going to be contradictory? But I will say I really think that I like it, and I think it was a little bit before its time because I think that the way that it was created was something that is now very popular, especially with that type of genre. So I think that they did a really good job kind of maybe jumping the gun on something like that, but it really didn't see its heyday until later on when people got to revisit it, and I was one of those. So that's kind of my take on both those.
All right, Jackie boy, what are your thoughts on Grindhouse? Or when did you see it for the first time?
I will say I did not see it when it first came out.
Definitely, I will say Robert Rodriguez and the whole like Mexican exploitation, not exploitation, but like I don't know how you'd say. Like I've never enjoyed Robert Rodriguez. Quentin Tarantino, I love, but I will say like the cast of both movies, or you could say that the feature itself is unreal. So
you kind of have to like really pay attention to this movie, just maybe for the performances. Like, Quentin Tarantino is one of the best dialogue directors ever. So you're going to get great cutbacks. You're going to get great things. So you have to appreciate it for that. So I enjoyed that about it. But like, also don't really enjoy when Robert Rodriguez has a one-legged chick who then has a machine gun like attached to her leg. Like, I personally just that doesn't fly with me. It's never really it's never really fly with me. That's like his style. I definitely would lean more towards Quentin Tarantino than Robert Rodriguez, but it's an entertaining film, and Harvey Weinstein, for how horrible he is, a horrible person, and we on this podcast don't condone anything he's ever done. Terrible person, but yeah, he's definitely right that to split it up into two movies, because it does have two different styles, and that could be very jarring to an audience that, like Owen's saying, just wasn't expecting it, or was before its time to go that big. But also, if it was made now, it would never have been made. So
yeah,
it's the back and forth of like, would we be too sensitive now to like exploit the women the way that they were, in this movie, or the tropes of Hispanic descents and all of that, or like, for God's sakes, whitewashing with some of them, so it's honestly, it's perfect timing. It's just, unfortunately, with those two directors coming off of the height, being at their height, they had the power to be like, no, we made it as a 2 double feature Grindhouse to elicit this feeling of old school double features Grindhouse. We're going to do it. But now they definitely would have been like, no one's sitting in a theater for 190 minutes. You're going to make these 2 films, and we're going to make it a lot more money. So definitely one of those films you can like skip through to the second half if you want to watch that half, or just the first half. So good movie. But at the end of the day, I'm just more Quentin Tarantino than Robert Rodriguez, and I think Robert Rodriguez bleeds over into the fantastical part of the whole entire movie.
Yeah. You know what? Speaking on Planet Terror, because that's the one that kind of comes first. Like when I was watching it today, like I forgot how like fun it is, though. It is a really fun movie, and if you're a fan of like zombie movies, Dawn of the Dead and all that, there's so many good kind of like throwbacks and callbacks to like all those type of films. And like I said, like you could tell you're dealing with a filmmaker that loves this genre, right? And you feel that when you're watching it. And I also want to give credit to both of them, even though I kind of feel it more when I'm watching Planet Terror. But I like that they kind of fight to kind of have certain actors take on roles that like you wouldn't normally like offer these roles to them like on a general basis. So you have like someone like Freddie Rodriguez, who's a badass in Planet Terror, but he's all of 5'6". It would not normally be in a movie like this in that role. But there's all this like faith and goodwill from like people like Robert Rodriguez, like, no, I know he can be a badass, like let's put him in it. Rose McGowan, find out later, Robert Rodriguez fought hard for her to be in it, and we didn't know, at least I didn't know then, there was all the Weinstein stuff going on that she had to deal with even before she was in this movie. And Robert Rodriguez learned about all that while they were kind of working on this project, and he went to bat for her and he fought for her. Robert Rodriguez was one of the people that said that Harvey Weinstein, he thinks that he buried this movie because of her, because that he fought to cast her.
Wow.
But I really thought, I thought it was still cool, like even not knowing that then, I love that he kind of has like faith in these people that kind of like, no, like she can lead this, like she's a good enough actress to lead this. People like Marley Shelton, like also is pretty badass in Planet Terror too. There's a lot of people that you wouldn't normally see getting to lead stuff like this, and I was just thought it was really cool that he like is like, no, like look at these guys, let them be badasses. I trust them to get this done. I trust them to sell this well. And that was just refreshing then to see, and it was really refreshing to rewatch it and be like, oh yeah, like they had their like moment here. And I always wonder why Rose McGowan didn't continue to have a moment after this movie came out. And then you find out all the stuff we find out later, and she didn't have her moment because it was always being roadblocked by someone like Harvey Weinstein, who would never allow her to really have it. And that was so confusing back then. I was like, she's the lead of this movie. She's in the Robert Rodriguez movie. She's also in the Death Proof segment as well, with like, directed by Quentin Tarantino. I always like, why didn't she like continue to ascend from that? And you find out later, she was always being like, nope, derailed from having her moment. but yeah, I mean, I'd love that stuff like that Rodriguez does, and the people that he casts, and like, you know, bringing people in, like, because they love people like Michael Biehn and Jeff Fahey. They love using all these people from like all these older like cult films and action films and stuff. That also might not be known to like a general audience at all. Like I know when I saw it with my friends, like they didn't recognize Michael Biehn at all, and I was like, "That's the guy from Terminator." And they're like, "Oh, well, he's old now." I was like, "Well, yeah, people get older." But like, if you're a real like cinephile, like you're using some of these people in this stuff, like it's so cool to kind of see. And I don't know, like Planet Terror, I think of the two, is certainly the most fun, and it moves a bit quicker. The issue, even though I prefer Death Proof, it almost feels like you're getting like when you're watching Grindhouse, it feels like you're watching 3 different movies, because the first half of Death Proof feels like a completely different film from like the second half, which has like Rosario Dawson and Mary Elizabeth Winstead and stuff. And that, for a lot of people, makes an already long movie feel even longer. But like I said, I love Quentin Tarantino dialogue, and there's some really good stuff in Death Proof. And Kurt Russell steals every moment he has in Death Proof as well.
He does such a good job, man.
He's so good. And yeah, I mean, I still think, because like I think Owen, you brought up the whole like, or I forgot who it was that brought up the whole like 2 different styles being so jarring, and that it could be off-putting to kind of have them both together. Jack said that. Watching it today, because like on Blu-ray, it wasn't on like one disc for a long time. They actually released them separately, and they finally released it, I think it was in 2010 or a little after that, on Blu-ray as one long feature with the trailers included. It is a little jarring jumping from one to the next, but I think the spirit of it still kind of feels the same. So it never really kind of felt like 2 completely different experiences for me, because I kind of got what they were trying to do. But that's kind of like,
I mean, the beauty of this film is it's allowing us the rare opportunity to see 2 filmmakers open up their toy box, and we get to see all of their toys. Like, that's what this film is. And filmmakers don't get that opportunity that much anymore. I think the only person that gets that kind of opportunity, pretty much film after film, is Wes Anderson, because it's
Christopher Nolan too.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan too, but like his is more spectacle, where Anderson, I think, likes to play the characters and the actors he brings into his projects are toys to play in his little He-Man castle that's all whimsical and stuff like that. Right. But with this film, you like Jack was saying, these characters that he brings in, these actors, they're not. I mean, there's some A-listers in there, but these are people that these 2 guys grew up watching and worshiping, and probably never thought in a million years, oh, I'm going to get to have Jeff Fahey and Michael Biehn in my movie, and they get to play brothers, and I get to have Tom Savini and Michael Parks. I got all these guys. And it was really, I mean, I hate to say this, it is kind of like a masturbatory experiment of filmmaking, where they really are just shooting loads all over the screen, but people like us love it. Like, that's what Gaius and I, we showed up for that. That's what we were there for, and we left 100% satisfied with what we got. Thank you to the Weinstein Company. And you can't just say Harvey, because there are many people involved in marketing and many people involved in this, to allow this to happen, at least give it the shot that it got before they did split it into 2 films. But again, like, after this comes out, you see Tarantino and Rodriguez completely take like a style shift and a genre shift away from this.
What was the next movies they did?
So Inglourious Basterds was like the year or 2 after this for Tarantino.
Yeah.
And then Robert Rodriguez, I think, was making more Spy Kids movies or something.
Nice.
But he was also putting together his El Rey network too, and then he also did the Sin City sequel.
But and Machete as well. We could talk about that.
Machete is a ton of this, Right. But there's something to be said. I think that this kind of had to be, I don't know, like the farewell hate fuck for these 2 filmmakers to move on from what they had built their careers on and start becoming more progressive filmmakers. And
right.
I think it shows. Like they had to just get this last one out of their system before they can start really making some good work. Now, Rodriguez, questionable. But Tarantino, I mean, let's face it, like Inglourious Bastards, followed by Django, followed by Hateful Eight, and then Hollywood, like that running streak, I don't think could have happened had he not gotten this out of the way.
Yeah, I agree with that, and
It's
I
an
kind of
interesting take, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that too
I
because
like that point.
you also kind of have like, you know, even though I'm sure it was probably rough working with the Weinstein Company because I know they could be like, you know, just mentioning Harvey, but I'm sure like it was probably a really difficult thing to kind of work in. But like you know, they
overbearing kind of thing.
A little overbearing, but they let them do
controlling.
They let them do whatever they wanted. The fact that like Quentin Tarantino built Death Proof around like, you know, Zoe Bell was like is a stunt woman that worked on Kill Bill, and he was like, I'm gonna like put you in this, and you're not just gonna be like a stunt woman. You're gonna like we're gonna make you a character. I'm gonna let you be an actress. You're gonna get to act. Like you can't really go to a lot of studios and be like, hey, can this stunt woman who's never really like, you know, done like a real, like can she lead the second half of like my movie? And like it is kind of cool that I think that I agree with Antonio where it's like, you know, this was like their moment where like, yo, like we've built up some goodwill that we can do this and you should just trust us to do it. Now it becoming a financial failure, I'm sure that they were like, well, see, we let you do what you wanted and like look at what happened. But you know, like before all that, it's kind of cool that they were in a place in their careers where they're like, this is how we want to do it. This is how we're going to do it. And we don't want to do it any other way. You know, Quentin Tarantino, of course, was way more successful at that time than like Robert Rodriguez. But at least Robert Rodriguez, too, was also coming off his own big hit with Sin City. So he had already built up a lot of goodwill as well. And like having them work together, them already being friends and working together, I think they had a lot of, you know, leeway of like, you know, we're allowed to kind of go into this kind of unchecked a little bit. You know, and not have to like be questioned by everyone about what we're doing.
Yeah, and Gaius, I think I really like that point because from what you and Antonio have been saying, it's like without that goodwill and their previous successes, something like this probably wouldn't have been able to be made. And so to have that success behind them and also now in front of them, like, hey, we trust you for what you're about to make. We trust your vision. We trust your writing skills. This has probably always been something that they just wanted to do. And it, like you were saying, Anthony, going into their toy box and having this script that they've probably had for a little while, but obviously now they were able to focus a little bit more on it. It was just really cool to see that also the development of how this movie has become a favorite of a lot of people's, especially in the Tarantino film sort of craze. A lot of people consider this one of their favorites, just because I think that it gave Quentin a lot of creative control, which is typically what they do for everything. But a lot of his later ones, I think, were more centered around theatrical success. And this one was just kind of, hey, I'm going to do the vision that I had. This is, like you said, Antonio, why I got into movies, why I wanted to direct movies. This is my vision. Thanks for seeing Jackie Brown in Pulp Fiction. I appreciate it, but now you get it. Now you get this one. This is the one that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and it's just really cool to see the reception of it post the failure, which I really appreciate.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
Okay.
No, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, it kind of raises a question then, like, when directors get their chance to make their movie the way they want to, how many times is it really actually successful? Like, the box office blockbuster, like, theatrical, it does the whole nine. Like, example, like I said, Christopher Nolan before, because the Honest Trailers made a hilarious point where it was like, Christopher Nolan Tenet, the most Christopher Nolan movie you could ever possibly make. And it didn't do well. Like, it was extremely confusing, convoluted. I mean, it's like that. So, like, I mean, Gaius, you're the encyclopedia, and Antonio, you might be too as well with movies. But, like, can you guys think of any other time where they were like, the director or like the studio's like, carte blanche, here you go, do what you want? And
I covered it. I covered it in another episode. Michael Cimino's The Deer Hunter made it entirely his way, makes tons of money, makes all the Oscars. So then United Artists says, okay, we gave him carte blanche on this one. Let's give him carte blanche on Heaven's Gate, which bankrupt the studio, tarnish the careers of everyone in it. So yeah, it is a hit and miss. The difference is with this one, and this is no, slander on Robert Rodriguez. He's always kind of ridden Tarantino's coattails.
I was waiting for that hot take.
He was riding his coattails on this one too. Tarantino could make an absolute fucking turd and people would still go and see it, and film nerds like us would dissect it and be like, oh, this is just the most beautiful turd ever. Like there's these conversations. And so Rodriguez knows that, and they're bros, they're simpatico. I don't think either of them gave a fuck if this made any money. The fact is they made it. And that's where I think that argument kind of becomes null and void, because it's almost as if they pulled a fast one on the studio. They're like, can you believe they let us make this shit?
Oh.
Like we just fucking got away with
Antonio just dished me the Uno reverse card.
Yeah, he did.
But if you follow these filmmakers as much as I have since I was a little kid, that's their attitude. That's their mentality. They're both film school dropouts. They both pretty much snuck their way into Hollywood. Do you really think that they are trying to make the masters happy? No, they're like, I'm going to make my film, and if it doesn't work for the Weinstein Company, boom, I'm going to jump over to Sony and make this movie, or I'm going to jump over to Paramount and make this movie, because they know that at the end of the day, they're talented and they can do a lot with a little. They can make their fun little movie. It can fail, and they're going to be just fine, and they've been just fine.
Yeah, and you're going to give me Kurt Russell? Oh, perfect. Let's go.
Yeah,
I do love that, how like those directors who go basically carte blanche on the movies, they basically just have their cast picked, and it's just like, you're playing this role, you're playing this role, you're playing this role. Let's go make a movie, boys and girls.
Or people beg to be in their movies.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like, that's the thing. Like, please let me be in your movie, Quentin. There's very few filmmakers that have that kind of draw.
Well, and now too, I mean, there's actors like Jonah Hill who have said, I don't even want to get the part necessarily. I just want to read for Tarantino just because of how good his writing is. So it's like just the ability to kind of be in the presence and be in the auditioning room to just read something that he's given you is an honor for a lot of people.
Yeah. I like what you said, Antonio, about like them being like, oh, you're going to like let me make this movie? You're just going to give me all this money? Because it feels like it's a big budget like student film. Like if you had like all the money when you're in like film school, this feels like what you would make if you were like a fan of this kind of stuff. They're like, all right, you're just going to let me do whatever I want? Like, all right, cool. I will like go balls to the wall with it and make the kind of movie I really want to make. And
so with that point, man, like we should get into like your little poll, because at the end of the day, like it goes to, and I don't think people can say, oh, I like them both equally, or I like it as a whole film. No, fuck you. You like one segment more than another. Like definitely someone does. So how about we jump into that and why? Because that really kind of breaks down like what this film actually does mean to people at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think so too. Because it's hard to view it as one, like, I mean, I guess it is. In one way, you can view it as one big experience, but they are two very different, like tonally different films, and there is one that's better than the other. I prefer Death Proof myself. On the poll, like I did a poll on both our Instagram pages and on Twitter. The Twitter one, Death Proof is winning by a lot. On Instagram, it's mostly Planet Terror that's getting most of the votes. I remember when this came out and when we would talk about it with friends who actually did like the movie, it felt like everyone I talked to preferred Planet Terror over Death Proof. I think just because it just moves a lot faster, there's more action. It's a little bit more ridiculous, so you can kind of be like, it's a little bit more silly. And I think it's interesting too, because like when you bring up Death Proof amongst like Quentin Tarantino's filmography, at least for a little while, people would leave it out. Like I would like bring up Death Proof, like, yeah, he directed that, and they were like, oh wait, what is that? And they were like, oh, Grindhouse that. And they're like, oh well, I thought that was both of them. I was like, no, that's still his. And it kind of gets left out of the conversation sometimes of the movies that he's made. Quentin Tarantino.
I do hope it gets left out in his count for 9 movies that are his.
Does anyone know that for sure? Like, if it's not part of the count, is it?
I hope it's not.
I don't think he considers it part of the count.
Okay, good. I would be really upset.
It's kind of funny though, because Death Proof did play at Cannes on its own without Planet Terror, and it was very well received there.
Yep.
But he doesn't consider it a solo film.
Yeah.
Now, I guess if he was like tired and didn't want to make that 10th film, he'd be like, no, it totally counts. I'm done. But you know, that's up to him. He wants to do.
Death Proof also made more money overseas than Planet Terror when they split it up.
Well,
so weird. It was just so weird. I mean, I guess that's a Tarantino name. It's a name. It's a Tarantino name. I guess that's probably why that happened. I don't know, Antonio. What's your preference? Like, you prefer one over the other?
I do, and I'll make my essay short, Professor. So I prefer, in the context of how this film was released, Planet Terror. Death Proof is a better film, 100%. I prefer Planet Terror because it sticks with the idea of the Grindhouse double feature. And I love that Robert Rodriguez, like I said, reached into his toy box and he pulled all these obscure zombie films from the 70s and the 80s. Nightmare City by Umberto Lenzi, probably the most prominent one in this film. Almost plot structurally very, very similar. Even the creatures look similar. He really stuck with that. Now, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, Death Proof takes this weird genre shift where like the first half of the film really plays to the grindhouse and exploitation nature of the film. It's even shot with the grainy footage and the scratches on the film. And then when we go into that second act break into the next part, we feel like we're watching a modern film. So it's got the same antagonist, but it's got a different feel. It's got a different atmosphere. It's got a different style of writing. You know, it feels almost more improvised, where the first one feels more kind of schlocky and exploitive, you know? That's my issue with Death Proof as a whole, as part of this Grindhouse feature. And Tarantino even said a little bit later that he feels that Death Proof was his least favorite film of his own for the mere fact that he over-tweaked it. Normally he can go into a film and knows exactly what he wants and knows exactly what things need to look like. This film, since it was kind of like off the cuff more than what he's used to, he tweaked with it a lot mid-production and post-production, and it's evident in that kind of genre and style shift.
Yeah, you can
tell.
So
as much as I love the film, as a whole, as part of the package, I prefer Planet Terror because it sticks more to the idea of what I think their original intention was.
Yep, I agree with you. I mean, I will say that, I agree with that too. I think Death Proof is a better film, but I do agree that just the style and overall look of Planet Terror, does fit more with what they were trying to do. And you know what? I think it's good for Robert Rodriguez that it leads with his film too, because like like you said, he wrote on Quentin Tarantino's coattails for a little bit, but he got a lot of goodwill by having his movie go first, and everyone's all hyped for that one. They're like, oh, that's pretty good. And it's kind of weird to be in a space where you're like, oh, that movie felt better than the Quentin Tarantino movie that comes after it, which probably people wouldn't really say on a regular basis, but like, you know, I think he understood the assignment a little bit more. And I think Quentin Tarantino did at the beginning of Death Proof, because you can really feel like the first, 30, 40 minutes of that, it feels like it's in the same family as Planet Terror. And then once that story ends and it shifts over to like Rosario Dawson and Zoe Bell, you are watching a film that came out in 2007. And that's exactly exactly what it looks like.
To kind of just put the button on it from my perspective to let the other guys go. I think he plays a little bit of bait and switch with us, because remember at the beginning of Death Proof, in the opening titles, it says Quentin Tarantino's Thunderbolt Road, and then it switches to a title card that says Death Proof.
Right. So
maybe he was trying to be extra meta and say, well, I actually made two different films, but because I'm a schlockmeister in this grindhouse genre, I'm going to splice them together in the middle, and that genre shift and style shift is actually intentional because it's something that some schlockmeister drive-in theater guy would do.
Right.
He's like, okay, I got these two different movies. I got Kurt Russell for a week. I made 3 films, but I need to turn them into one. So I'm going to put them together.
You took my point, damn it. That's what I was going to say.
To
Damn it.
Well, I want to hear your side of it too. So
It sounds way
I'm
better
done.
coming from
I'm
you
done.
though. Like it sounds no, but I definitely was like the graininess of the first part of the film to the actual just regular good quality of the second part of Death Proof made it seem like two films. It just what he does with the camera just made it seem like two films, and I feel like that's what he was trying to do too. It's like, well, maybe he even saw it on the wall that they were going to split it up, so he was just protecting himself in that way. It's like, I'm still going to be able to make a Grindhouse feature, even if they split it up. I'm still going to have two in it. Without saying it, that goes without saying is that Death Proof was probably more favorite for me. Just Quentin Tarantino is my guy, and zombies at the end of the day
Not your
aren't
thing.
really my thing.
All right, about you, Owen?
That's subjective, right?
I definitely like Death Proof better. I think I liked the flow of it a little bit more. I enjoyed how I did enjoy sort of the cut in the middle. I thought that was his sneaky way of saying, "Yep, I'm the boss. I'm going to do what I want, and this is kind of the way it's going to happen." So, in a double feature, I'll give you my own double feature. So that's I think his kind of way of taking the high horse and basically saying, I'm the leader in this. Also, him going second. I think he likes to be the closing act, regardless of. It's hard when you kind of get into those situations of which one comes first and which one comes second. Once you have such a distinct genre coming first, it's hard to kind of switch your subjective mindset to go into this next one. But I think that's what Tarantino does so well, is that even after the first one ends, you get this sort of completely different shift that works so well, and then it shifts again, and so he kind of messes with you like that, and so that's what I actually enjoyed a lot more about it. And just overall, I think that one has stood up a little bit better. That's what I enjoyed about it.
I've always wondered what it would be like if they switched them. If they led with Death Proof and then went into Planet Terror, would it flow as well?
No,
at all?
I don't think it was done completely intentional. I mean, I think I'm a little bit older than this crew. I used to go to the drive-in a lot in my teenage years because we still had them out here in Utah, and reading books about like these Grindhouse films and these drive-in films, especially, they were always done with double features because they were usually either second-run movies or low-budget movies that would have a smaller rental price for the establishment. You always put the more exciting film first, because the second film is a film that you make out to. You get bored by it. So you make out with your girlfriend. So you watch the horror film, and then the film after was usually either some kind of like drama or romance or some kind of crime thing. You put the slower one first because that's the one you're going to make out to. I think Tarantino does that really well because, I mean, his second film is the sexy film. It really is. You've got a very attractive cast. You've got a lot of sensual moments, but it's also Tarantino. You know that he's a trickster, and his dialogue is so great. It's almost like he's saying, I dare you to make out during my segment. I'm going to flip some shit on you. So if I know my man the way I think I do, I think that was part of the formula.
Yeah, I think so too, actually. That makes a lot of sense. I also, we'd be remiss before we go. The trailers that they played during this movie kind of took on a life of their own, or at least some of them did. And they were directed by some pretty solid filmmakers as well. Because the movie starts with the trailer for Machete, which actually went on to become its own feature film with a sequel, because they love them some Danny Trejo, and the world loves Danny Trejo. And then
man makes a good taco.
Yeah, it makes a good taco as well. And then Rob Zombie directed the trailer for Werewolf Women of the SS. Edgar Wright, who he directed Don't. Eli Roth directed the trailer for Thanksgiving. And then Jason Eisner directed Hobo with a Shotgun, which also became a full-length feature film. Now, of all of these back in the day when I saw this, I remember when people got up during this part of the movie. That's when people were starting to weirdly leave. This section of the movie is like probably the funniest for me, because they really do these trailers really well, and they are really, like, if you were to watch like some kind of like haunted house movie trailer that came out like in the 70s, like looking at the trailer for Don't, it really does that stuff like really well. And I remember, I still to this day, every year I post the trailer for Thanksgiving on G-Reels, and I tag Eli Roth in it because I want Thanksgiving to be a movie so bad. He used to like my posts. He doesn't like the post anymore because I think he's like, it's done, man. It's not gonna happen.
No chance.
No chance. But I was hoping that Thanksgiving would become a movie, and there was like a lot of talk at the time that it could have been. But I think when like Grindhouse like was a commercial failure, those talks kind of went away a little bit. But I also thought it was cool that you have these own little things that like for even like years later they've become like they have their own life now. Like people like this section of the film even more so than like, you know, some of the main portions of the film too. It's such an important part, and it's cool when you're watching it at home now to have them all as one feature included with the movies when you're watching it at home, because you didn't really get that experience unless you saw it in theaters. And I thought that was really cool. I thought they were all pretty well done. But yeah, Thanksgiving is probably my favorite one. But today when I was watching it, the one for Don't like cracked me up because I was like, yep, that's exactly how a trailer for a movie like that would play during that time period, and they do it so well. But if you guys have any thoughts on like some of the trailers, feel free to jump in with that.
Yeah,
too.
Don't is my favorite. Not only because I think it is like the most fun, especially Edgar Wright doing it, but let's not forget that Will Arnett does the voice
for the
trailer.
Voiceover. Yeah.
And that just makes it that much better.
So much better.
Yeah. Yeah. If you watch the fake trailer for Thanksgiving and then watch the original trailer for like 1978's Halloween, they follow almost the same beats. Like you could tell like he was heavily inspired by that. So the whole time I was watching that trailer, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, Eli Roth, you know, he's makes horror movies. He's inspired by a lot of that stuff too. He loves that genre and that time period for the genre. You know, yeah, like I said, every year I used to tag him in that trailer. It was posted every year on Thanksgiving. I was like, please make this a movie.
Please make it. Please make it.
Please make this a movie. Like someone out there will see it. I'll see it. If you want my $13, I'll pay for it this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of completes the whole experience of it. Like I like the fact that they even let them do that. Like they were like, hey, this whole middle section of the film where people are going to be very confused by what's going on. Why are you guys showing
Run Wild
movie trailers? Just go with it. And kind of thinking, we always talk about like what these movies' legacies are now, as compared to when they came out. What do you think people kind of think of these movies, this movie now, like in 2022? I mean, I know there's a bigger appreciation for it than it was in 2007, and I am kind of curious where, like, for both of these guys, where it kind of ranks for them, in their like filmography.
For me, I think this was just a fun one-off. Like, I don't generally hold it up as a rankable item between either filmmaker, because I really think this was just an exercise in fun and excess and love for films. I would say that, yeah, this wouldn't work theatrically now, but here in the pandemic, if this would have been released as like a Shudder miniseries or some kind of streaming thing, I think it would have had a huge audience. We're seeing a lot of retro stuff on streaming right now. So yeah. I think it could have, I mean, if Army of the Dead can get made on Netflix and be like the number one movie on Netflix for the longest time and get like spin-offs, man, Planet Terror could have had a longer and more respectable life as maybe some kind of streaming mini series or whatever. So I think that anything like this in the future will not get made for the theater. It'll get made for a streaming service and would probably be somewhat successful.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you just said, Antonio.
Yeah, I think like, you were saying like, Owen, you even mentioned too, like, I think if they kind of approach this now, and we've always talked about like how like streaming kind of like, for projects like this that wouldn't play well in theaters back then would probably play very well like on a streaming service today. And, especially now it seems like more than ever, what's old is new again. Like that's like everyone's thing now. Like some people build podcasts off of it. So like, it is like, that's true, right? Like what's old is new. And like, there's a bigger appreciation for these things now than there was like 15 years ago. But yeah, I do think it's interesting that you said you probably wouldn't rank it amongst their stuff. I guess I can kind of agree with that, where it's like, this was like a fun thing that they got to do. It's not like it's not like his Inglourious Bastards or Django or Pulp Fiction. It's hard to like rank them in there. I think for Robert Rodriguez, though, I mean, because like I'm like not a huge fan of all his stuff, I would probably try to rank this one with him, just because I'm also not a huge. I did like the first Spy Kids, but I'm not a huge like I was trying to think of like what else he's done. Like I guess El Mariachi and Desperado. I love The Faculty as well in its own way.
The Faculty, I would say, is probably his peak in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then here's a problem with him. I love the guy. I love his ingenuity. He knows how to stretch a dollar, but he did kind of let himself become a caricature of himself with his films, and that it's just evident that he's always just trying to ride that same formula. And that's not saying for like a lack of creativity or a talent with the guy. The guy's extremely talented. Other directors, other producers trust him with his work. I mean, like James Cameron with the Alita.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that if he came back with this similar style that he had in Planet Terror, I think a lot of people would be welcoming to it.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, what's cool is that like people like us can appreciate. Like, I mean, even though like we talked about like the age difference and stuff, like we have a big appreciation for stuff like this. I was probably the same way in my theater on opening night that Antonio was on opening night. That's why I was so surprised when it only made like $11 million in opening weekend. I was like, well, maybe everyone was in my theater and nowhere else, because I thought it was gonna be like a huge hit when it came out. But sometimes these like underdog cult films are like, I kind of almost like when they kind of have a life like this and they're not really initially that successful. I mean, we even talked about it when we talked about like Zodiac for that anniversary, how it didn't make a lot of money then, but like people appreciate it more now. And
yeah.
And, I know when you're a filmmaker, you probably don't think about that when you're making it. Like, oh, I want like instant gratification. But I think even they kind of appreciate it later when it's like, oh, this found its own life, eventually down the road. And I think this movie definitely did itself.
I think so too.
So it's been a very fun one to revisit, and I'm glad we got to revisit it with Antonio, because like this is your more so than us. This is your shtick, your wheelhouse. So we were very happy to have you on the talk about it, and
love it. Thank you.
And then gave you also sitting through like some of that Morbius stuff. That was, at least we got here. That's all that matters.
Now I don't have to see the movie, and I had more fun listening to you guys talk about it. So
yeah, exactly.
Yep,
that's what we're going for.
That's where we're going. So yeah, we're just gonna wrap things up here. Next week, we'll be talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm actually seeing it. I'm gonna see it with my brother. Owen, if you want to go, you can also go too.
All right.
Yeah, and then we might talk a little bit about Cabin in the Woods next week, because it came out on April 13th, 2012. So we're just gonna discuss that one a little bit. Definitely an underrated film in my opinion too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's gonna be fun to kind of cover those things, and hopefully we won't have to talk about people like Will Smith anymore. I think hopefully that's done, and we can move on to
close that out.
Yeah, if Hollywood, if you're listening, someone else fuck up, so like we can start talking about someone else.
Yeah. So.
But
exactly.
But as always, Owen, you can sign us off.
Well, Antonio, I just want to thank you for being on again. I mean, your insight is, especially into this genre and the time frame, is just impeccable and unbeatable from anyone else that we've talked to. So just always a pleasure to have you on. Jack, thanks for being on as well. I mean, we love having you as well, just with Morbius, and always appreciate your takes on everything. And I always like to give a shout out to Playlist. They do such an incredible job. Our partnership just keeps getting stronger. And yeah, continue to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You get to see Antonio if you'd like to check it out on YouTube. Gaius, I think this is the second time you've kind of updated your background. We still got your movie wall in the back, right? So,
beautiful lights.
Yeah, and the nice lighting. So, also his microphone looks like a lava lamp if you want to check that out. Yeah, just keep on listening. We love all the support, and we love doing this. It's our favorite thing to do on a Monday. So appreciate it, guys.
Thank you so much.
Like, subscribe, share.
Oh yeah, Jack, you're good at that. Do that again.
Like, subscribe, and share.
Get on Apple iTunes, whatever the hell you're on. Click the 5-star, leave a comment. We don't care if it's a bad comment. The algorithm cares about comments. Like and subscribe, share, people. Do it. That's your homework. Good night.